Chicken nuggets.
Absolutely. Absolutely chicken nuggets. Couldn't have
I
said it
made
better
turkey
myself.
wings last night.
What?
I baked some turkey wings last night. They turned out pretty good.
Oh, that's good. My dinner last night did not turn out well. I'm really upset about it. Like, I think I did everything I could and did everything right, but it was just like not very flavorful. The chicken was dry. I have all these leftovers now. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them. We'll give Kyle just a minute. Oh my gosh, I'm so sleepy. I wish I could get some coffee. I have to leave after this class to go to a doctor's appointment, so I know I don't have time to get coffee in between. Oh, I always forget that this hand sanitizer is glittery. It's so weird. Also, ow, I didn't realize I had a cut on my finger until I just used that hand sanitizer and it stings so bad. No fun. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mark Kyla absent. David is here with us. Okay, so I want to go ahead and get into some stuff for today because I'm going to introduce synthesis essays to you. And I have this really handy dandy website that we're going to look at in just a minute. I'm going to kind of go through it with you. But I've kind of told you guys before what a synthesis essay is, and we'll certainly look at some later on in the week. But essentially, actually, several of you have already written a synthesis essay without knowing it because when you did your independent choice argumentative essays, you used some outside sources. It wasn't required, but several of you did. Essentially, all a synthesis essay is an argumentative essay that incorporates outside sources to support your own argument. It's the only thing that makes it kind of like the harder. I don't think know if it's the hardest. I don't know if it's harder than rhetorical analysis, but um, kind of just the more labor intensive of the three kinds is because you do have to kind of read through all the sources first and see what's going to support the argument you're trying to make. We will, like I said, look at some of these later on so you can see like how the prompt kind of sets it up and how deeply you need to look at all the sources. When we do the AP test, which we're kind of looking at when we're going to do that because they've given us some options about like rescheduling and if we want to do in-person testing or like how we want to do it. Miss Copeland and I are trying to figure this out right now. You have how long? What is it? An hour and 2 hours and 15 minutes to write all three essays. I think that's right. And the synthesis essays first always, and they sort of suggest that you spend the first 15 minutes just reading the sources, which is honestly a solid idea. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we're just going to kind of go through this together, this website. It's very handy. And easy to understand. And y'all just interrupt me if you have any questions about any of this. So we're writing a surprisingly good synthesis essay. So your class has been writing a few argumentative essays here and there. Yes, we did. You're getting pretty good at it. But now we have to take it a step further and write a synthesis essay. The name is kind of intimidating, but all synthesizing means is like putting things together essentially. So all we're doing is synthesizing our ideas and other people's ideas. So let's look at what it actually is. When you think about a synthesis essay, you can think of it as being kind of like an argumentative essay. There's one key difference. Your instructor provides you with the sources you're going to use to substantiate your argument. And that might sound a little bit easier than an argumentative essay, but it's just a different kind of thinking and writing that might take some getting used to. They're about presenting a strong position and identifying the relationships between your sources. This is a very important thing to remember, and something that even my most advanced students in English 101, 102 still struggle with, is just summarizing sources. You don't want to go through your sources and pick several you like and spend a whole paragraph saying source C argues that blah, blah, blah. We don't want to know what the other person's argument is. We want to know what your argument is, and we want you to use the other people's argument to support what you're saying. Make your point and back it up with the evidence that's found in those sources. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. A lot of your sources are probably going to have information that could support both sides of an argument, so it's important to read over them carefully and put them in the perspective of your argument. What I would recommend is kind of, once you see the prompt or the question that you're answering, figure out where you stand on it, and then look through your sources and figure out how can these either agree with what I'm saying and support that, or how could I potentially use it to form a counter argument. Hi. And that's kind of what they're saying here. If there's information in these sources that goes against your main points, don't just cast that aside and say it's no use to me. Acknowledge it and then kind of show how your argument's stronger. And that's what I mean by a counter argument. So this might seem a little bit theoretical now. We're gonna look at some examples that are gonna make this seem a little bit more tangible to you guys. So the example that this website uses is a concrete example that takes a page from the Slytherin's book. Y'all know I'm a Harry Potter person, and uses cunning resourcefulness when analyzing sources. So the first thing, just some like great and not so great topics for your synthesis essay. And this honestly sort of goes for regular argumentative essays as well. A great topic is one that encourages you to choose a position on a debatable topic. So these topics shouldn't be something that's general knowledge, like vegetables are good for you. We all know that. Most people would agree that vegetables are healthy, and there's so many sources to support that. Some bad synthesis topics would be like if the topic is not clear enough, if it's too broad for you to form a proper argument, things like that. If you wrote a synthesis on gender, that's so broad. There's no way that you can write an effective synthesis essay about that. You're going to need to hone that in a little bit. Education, there's so many topics you could talk about that are relevant to education. Obesity, what are you saying about obesity? We gotta narrow that focus. Some other not so great examples are topics that clearly only have one correct side of the argument. Something that's like sort of a duh factor. What you need is a topic that has several sources that can support more than one position. So let's talk about what a good topic looks like. A great synthesis essay topic is going to be concentrated. A lot of them are based around social issues. There's a lot of gray area and general debate on those issues, which is what makes them great topics for your synthesis. So some examples of great prompts, great topics would be, do video games promote violence? So obviously there's a big difference between writing an essay about video games and writing an essay that answers the question, do video games promote violence? Is the death penalty an effective way to deter crime? If you guys remember, when we did the intro, thesis, and conclusion presentation, that was one that some of the samples were written about, and they were really specific. Should young children be allowed to have cell phones? You're either going to have a yes position or a no position or some kind of qualifying position, but there's definitely plenty of information floating around in the universe to support either side of that. Or do children benefit more from homeschooling or public school? Lots of debate about that. Did you guys know Mr. Nykirk was homeschooled his whole life until college? Explains a few things. The list of good topics goes on and on. When looking at your topic, be sure to present a strong opinion for one side or the other. Straddling the fence makes your synthesis essay look much weaker. And I know that I have made comments on some of your essays in the past about kind of waffling back and forth, riding the fence. And sometimes people think that if they're riding the fence, that's a qualifying argument. But you kind of have to realize that there's a distinction between those. If you're saying like, it depends, or I could go either way on this, that's riding the fence. If you say this thing is a valid argument, except in the case of one particular thing, that would be qualifying the argument. Or like, I don't agree with that, except for this particular instance. So let's get down to how to actually write the synthesis essay. We're going back to the Slytherin thing, and our topic is, are Slytherin house members more evil than members of other houses? If you're a Harry Potter person, you probably have a strong opinion about this. If you're not a Harry Potter person, you don't have to know a whole lot to follow along with what we're saying here. The main bad guy from Harry Potter, Lord Voldemort, was in Slytherin, and because of that, they have kind of a bad reputation. There are a lot of dark wizards that come out of Slytherin house. Are there any good wizards that come out of Slytherin house? I think we're going to address that. That's just their little crest. Okay, so like with any good essay, organization is absolutely critical. We're going to look at these 5 steps to write a surprisingly good synthesis essay. It gets tiring to say synthesis essay lots of times in a row. So before you decide on your position, be sure to thoroughly read your sources. I do recognize the fact that we've got kind of limited time when we're actually doing like the exam. We'll do some preparation for the exam, particularly in 4th quarter, where you're going to be timed. You're only going to have so long to read your sources and then write your essay. I might do some things where like I give you the sources one day and we write the next day. But when we're writing like out of class synthesis essays, you'll obviously have like plenty of time to find and read your sources. Sometimes find them, sometimes I'll give them to you. Look for common information among them and start making connections in your mind as you read. So for the purposes of this Slytherin synthesis example, let's say we have 4 different sources. And on the exam also, they're always going to be listed like source A, source B, source G. So source A is going to be a data table that lists the houses of all members of the Death Eaters, which are Voldemort's followers, like the most evil people. A data table that lists the houses of everyone who's one of those guys. Source B is a complete history of the Slytherin house, including the life and views of Salazar Slytherin, who founded Slytherin house. Source D is a document containing the names of students who were sorted into a different house than what the sorting hat had originally assigned to them, which I suppose would be probably like Harry Potter. If you've seen the movie, in the beginning, he's like, oh, I don't know where to place you. And he's like, not Slytherin, don't Slytherin. It's like, you do really well in Slytherin, but all right, Gryffindor. I've seen it a lot of times. Source D is a history of the Battle of Hogwarts. So what we want to do is decide what our position is going to be. We've read through these sources. We decide if we think, how's the thing phrased exactly? If we think all Slytherin house members are more evil than members of other houses, or if we decide no, Slytherin house members are no more evil than members of other houses. This is an important thing to remember. You don't actually have to believe your position, but be able to support your argument. We've never had like a debate club or anything here at Allegro, but when you're in debate clubs, That's something that you regularly have to do. Like you're just assigned, like there's a topic and one person will be assigned pro and the other person will be assigned con, and it's their job to convince the audience or convince the moderator or whatever that their position makes more sense. And it's not necessarily something that they really believe, but the point is to be able to argue your point effectively. So also remember that once you pick a position, you need to stick with it. You want your argument and your synthesis to be as strong as possible. Sticking to your position is the best way to achieve that. So back to this example, after you read through these 4 documents, the position we're going to take is that the students and alumni of Slytherin House are not more evil than students in other houses. So we need to write a thesis statement to reflect that. This is very critical since you're going to back up your thesis statement throughout your synthesis essay. So the example thesis that this person's come up with: students and alumni from Slytherin House are not more evil than students in the other houses because they fill the whole spectrum of morality. Evil wizards are found in all houses, and their house traits of cunning, resourcefulness, and ambition do not equate to an evil nature. I feel like it's a little bit wordy, but for the most part, this is a solid thesis. I wouldn't be upset if this was your thesis. It takes a firm stance. We know that we're arguing they are not more evil than other houses. It's giving you 3 reasons, which kind of sets up the rest of the essay. I would kind of expect to see a paragraph about how Slytherin folks fill the whole spectrum of morality. I'd see another one about how evil wizards are found in all houses. And I'd see another one about how their house traits don't equate to an evil person. So then you want to draft an outline. It's kind of a pun that says draft a killer outline because Voldemort was literally a murderer. Now that you have your argument down in words, you need to figure out how you want to organize and support that argument. And a great way to do this is to create a synthesis essay outline. I want to click on that and see what it takes us to. I don't remember. We might look back at that if we have time. Okay, so write out your thesis statement at the top and then list each of your sub-arguments. Under each sub-argument, which would just be like the 3 kind of points that you're making in your thesis, list the support. So part of this outline might look like this. You've got your thesis statement at the top. One of the subtopics, sub-argument, is that evil wizards are found in all houses. That's the second thing they were talking about there. Some support, they found something in that graph or map or whatever, the examples of Death Eaters from other houses, and there's something in source D, examples of what Death Eaters from other houses did at the Battle of Hogwarts. Really nice, really effective. This could also work if you used that, what's it called? Persuasion map that I gave you guys at some point before Christmas, that has like the kind of flow chart type of deal, and you could put your thesis under the intro part at the top, and then it's got your 3 different paragraphs, different sub-arguments. Then under the evidence, you can go back to your sources and kind of fill in which sources are going to be able to support you. And obviously that's only for 1 paragraph, not for the whole thing. Use your sources wisely. You would think that they would use a snowy owl here because Harry Potter's pet was a snowy owl. When thinking about how to use your sources as a support for your argument, you should avoid a couple of mistakes that I'm going to tell you about and do a couple of things instead. Don't summarize the sources. This is what I said at the very beginning of this. This would be an example of summarizing your sources. Source A indicates which houses the Death Eaters belong to. It shows that evil wizards come from all houses. All right, well, that's, it's not really giving us a whole lot of information. You've already argued that, and we don't need to just have a paraphrase of what the source says. We need to know how that helps support your argument. So you need to, rather than summarize those, you need to analyze those. A good example of how to do that would be, writing instead of that first thing, you could write, although many Death Eaters are from Slytherin, there are still a large number of dark wizards such as Quirinius, Quirrell, and Peter Pettigrew from other houses. And they got that information from source A. And for the record, this is also how you should cite it. Don't structure your paragraphs around your sources. That's also a very easy trick to fall into. And if I were teaching this to you in 8th grade, I might encourage it. But I'm not teaching it to you in 8th grade. Y'all are all in 10th or 11th, so you can write in a more sophisticated way. A lot of people fall into this trap of like, if you have to quote 3 sources, finding one source that you know will work and building the first paragraph around it, then finding something from a different source, building your second paragraph around that. That's just really not what you want to do, because you are at that point telling us more about what someone else thinks than what you think. And that's not the point. You want to draw relationships between those sources. So what you should do is structure your paragraphs around your arguments. Formulate various points of your argument. Use 2 or more sources per paragraph to support those arguments. It says 2 or more sources. I think it's fine if you only do 1 source per paragraph. It's just that you do run the risk of kind of building your argument around that source. And then once you have all that stuff, you can kind of get to writing. All you have to do is fill in the information and make it sound pretty. And genuinely, like, this really shows how effective pre-writing is and using outlines. Like, I definitely highly encourage that. That really does all the hard work for you. Coming up with a thesis and coming up with an outline, that's the hard work. Once you've got that stuff, it's pretty easy to fill in the rest of the blanks. Always keep your thesis statement in mind so that your synthesis essay has a clear sense of direction. Hopefully that makes it sound a little bit less intimidating. Let's go over to this other thing that I opened up and see. Trying to move my little thing.
Miss McClellan.
Yeah.
I have a question about like the format we have to write it in. Do we have to write it in like MLA or APA?
MLA.
Okay, because I suck at APA. I'll tell you that right now.
Me too, AJ, for sure. And in fact, I think I linked at some point to the Purdue Online Writing Lab, which is really handy. It's got so much information. No matter what format you're using, it can tell you how to do everything. In fact, I had another teacher friend of mine, not an Allegro teacher, that last week she messaged me on Instagram and was like, hey, this is really random and not related to anything you're posting, but do you know how I would cite this particular thing in APA format? And I was like, I don't, because I'm not an APA person. This is my guess, but also check out the Online Writing Lab at Purdue and it will absolutely tell you.
Mr. Mike, he taught us how to like format stuff in APA last year, and I always got something wrong. Like whether like how I cited it, or I always got it wrong.
Did he do APA and MLA with y'all?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I like that he did that. I feel like a lot of people didn't retain it, but it's fine. I only ever had to write like 2 essays in APA, but it's so weird. I feel like most people and like most fields do use APA more, but like literature classes and I think some linguistics classes and stuff do tend to use MLA more, which is why that's what I'm familiar with. In like all my education classes in grad school, it was kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And then last year, yes, boy, time just melts together. A bunch of teachers here took a grad class together to get like points for our continuing certification, and all that stuff was in APA, and it was so hard. And like we could see each other's posts and stuff. It looked like it was kind of hard for all of us. Like there are definitely people who did not get it right. But we'll go back over some MLA stuff. do I still have this open? Yes. In like practice essays and stuff, and on the actual exam, since you have the sources like listed out for you as this is source A, this is source B, all you have to do is cite it like this, source A. And you don't have to like create a works cited page for the exam. We will do a couple of synthesis essays outside of class, like on our independently, not timed. And I think for one of them, I give you the sources. I'm trying to recall. I give you the sources and they're listed as like source A, source B, and you would still cite it like that. For the other one, you're finding your own sources, in which case you would make a works cited page and cite them like normal MLA, like McClellan 26 or whatever. Hopefully that makes sense. But we'll definitely go back over more MLA stuff and how to cite things, particularly when we start actually writing our first one. We'll, at the end of this week, we'll do this, like, it's not an essay, it's a shorter writing assignment, and it's more like sort of creative and fun, but kind of gets you used to incorporating these other sources. So I think after that, it'll become a little bit more clear. Okay, I didn't really look at this ahead of time, but I want to just kind of go through this and see if it gives us any new information. We did that. I feel like this might be saying basically the same things. Oh, I like the way that they've done this though. This is sort of cute. It's just a different format of the same kind of organization charts that we've used before. You've got your introduction. I kind of want to save this. Sorry. I'm going to look at that later and be like, what was that? Your hook, your context, your thesis. I would change that to narrowing down. Body, thesis, support. It's got like claim 1, claim 2, claim 3. It's just kind of how to like, it's just a different format of how to organize an essay. Writing one about, are the Star Wars prequels good movies? And we're arguing that they are. These are our sources. So I kind of like just looking at this. I'm not going to go through this extensively, but since these are not like source A, source B, source D, just kind of taking a look at one, if you did have to do a works cited, might be sort of helpful. This is funny. Strong hook sentence. We know. Is this giving us any new information? I don't think it is. This is just sort of this is just written out rather than using like an infographic, but it's essentially the same thing, just effective organization strategies. And when it says claims, that's just like an argumentative statement. I think it said something up here about, where is it? Where did I see it? Claims. A statement you make that supports your thesis. That's a great place to apply logos or pathos to your synthesis. So an example for this one would be, between practical set design and digital effects, The Phantom Menace is visually groundbreaking for a film made in 1999 when CGI was still in its infancy. Looking back on it now, it looks terrible, for the record, but for then it was a big deal. So that's a claim. That's just think of it as like your topic sentence for each paragraph. I feel like topic sentence is a pretty like elementary thing to say, but you get it. Make sure you're backing up the significance of your evidence with logic. It's not enough to just show your evidence. This is actually really important. You also need to explain how the evidence from your sources support your claim and your thesis. And we'll look at this example in just a second, but this is definitely a thing that people struggle with, because when you're the one writing the essay, you understand how the dots are connected in your head, and it might be obvious to you because you're the one who thought of it, but it's not necessarily going to be obvious to your reader. So like if you just throw a quote in there and don't explain or analyze how the sources support your claim, it can sound really disjointed and like kind of random, because none of us are mind readers, or if you are, please let me know, because that's cool. And we can't connect those dots for you. It's your job as a writer to connect the dots for us. And I even encourage like over explaining, just because it's better to over explain and know that you made your point than assume that everybody understood and actually wind up having a really weak argument, if that makes sense. There are definitely times where I grade essays and I'll write something like, I think I know where you were going with this, but I'm not sure, and I should be. And it's your job to make sure that whoever's reading your essay is sure of how these things connect. So this example, this approach to special effects requires a significant amount of hard work and artistic vision that cannot be duplicated to the same degree that George Lucas applies to this film. Each Star Wars film takes place in a galaxy far, far away, and with new technology and a larger budget available, Lucas is able to deliver this completely alien universe's aesthetic the way it was always meant to be seen. This alone is a special achievement for any filmmakers who try to revisit their work and finish a story they long to tell. So this is really good. They've got their claim here. They give the evidence, and they kind of analyze here, like what are the bigger implications? Like what can we take away from this argument? Counter argument and rebuttal. I feel like sometimes people are afraid to write a counter argument because they don't want to like weaken their own argument, but actually the point of acknowledging a counter argument is really to further strengthen your own argument. You're kind of saying, I acknowledge that some people might feel this other way, but let me tell you why my way is more right. Every argument has at least two sides, sometimes more. So as you're working to synthesize your sources, you want to show that you've considered one or two other stances. You still need to demonstrate why the opposing viewpoint is valid but not as strong as yours. And that's called a rebuttal or refutation. So an example of that, the question remains, are the Star Wars prequels perfect? The answer is no. As films, they have many flaws, some forgivable, some less so. And they've cited that. No film is perfect, but each film should set out to accomplish certain goals. In this regard, no, I didn't realize that Trinae left. In this regard, the prequels excel at providing an entertaining science fiction adventure experience that appeals to a wide audience. So they're kind of acknowledging that, yeah, these prequels are not perfect, and a lot of people are arguing that they're not perfect. We acknowledge that, but good films accomplish these things, and this film does do that. And then we're wrapping up our synthesis essay. It's not really, the conclusion here is not going to be super different than the conclusion in any other type of essay. You want to restate the importance of your issue and kind of guide your reader back to your thesis. You can tell the reader what would happen if that argument was not accepted, like what are the larger implications? And this is a really good opportunity to kind of make your last stand, emphasize the importance of your issue and viewpoint. So I am going to read you this conclusion, even though I think you kind of understand. I just feel like conclusions are tough and something that we've struggled with, and it cannot hurt to look at a good one. While film critics and audience members are entitled to their opinions about the films they watch and enjoy, The success of the Star Wars prequels cannot be ignored. These films succeeded at the box office and paved the way for new Star Wars stories to be told. They allowed audiences to revisit their favorite sci-fi universe and see it for the first time in the grand spectacle that Lucas had always wanted to portray. Without these films, Star Wars may have only existed as a classic trilogy, cherished and admired, but ultimately lost to time. The success of the prequels ensures Star Wars continued an everlasting presence in cinema. Really solid, really solid. It does that thing that kind of guides us away from the specificity of what we've talked about in our body paragraphs. Talks about like the larger implications. Star Wars could have been lost to time. I mean, like, I doubt it because they're the biggest film trilogy ever, but this is where we were before I scrolled back up. This is essentially exactly what that infographic was, but it's just spelled out for you instead of in pictures. But it's helpful to look back at this as you're planning to write and kind of recognize what you're accomplishing and how much of this sort of lines up. Oh, synthesis outline template. Let's put this in my own Google Drive so that I can share it with you guys later. Okay, so any other questions about synthesis essays? And I know that right now this is maybe kind of hard to wrap your head around just because it's all theoretical right now, but once we actually get some practice with it, I think you will have an easier time of it. It's not harder than rhetorical analysis. I always think that rhetorical analysis is the hardest thing to, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Rhetorical analysis is the hardest thing to teach just because you have not written anything like that before. But you have written argumentative essays. You wrote them before you came to this class. Argumentative essays are like the thing that get taught in previous grades. And you more or less know how to do synthesis essays too. Some of you guys have shown me that because you used outside sources for your last argumentative essay. It's not more difficult, I don't think. It's just more involved. Any further questions about any of that? Okay, so we still have like 10 minutes left, but I think I'm not going to start something new today. I will remind you guys that tomorrow's the first of our Wednesday success sessions. I don't expect to really meet with anyone tomorrow because we don't have any grades in here yet. So no one is doing badly. No one's doing well either. You're just not, we don't have any grades. But we'll go ahead and kind of ease into this format where like we meet, we take attendance, I tell you what you're doing, and then we end the Zoom and you go work independently, because that's kind of the way that Wednesdays will work. And like I mentioned yesterday, I'm hoping to kind of get more of a weekly schedule so that you'll kind of know what to expect on Wednesdays and every other day. But I just don't have that worked out yet. I just haven't had the time to totally figure that out. It's something that I want to sort of do with all of my classes, have it more of on a structured schedule. Any more questions? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the call then. Y'all can spend your time working on other stuff. You can work on other stuff or take a nap in the comfy chair. I will see y'all tomorrow.